Logic Pro has tons of features, but more often than not, my favorites are the ones that aren't flashy. Instead, they're quiet and they just get things out of your way so you can create. Here are 5 features in Logic that have genuinely changed the way I've worked, plus a bonus for more advanced users. First, a couple of tips for keeping your sanity inside the piano roll. Now, of course, I love Logic Pro's piano roll, but sometimes it does feel like you have to go pretty far and wide to see all of the notes in your performance. For example, the first note of my performance starts down here in the octave of C5. And then to see the top note, I have to go beyond C6, back down to the previous octave. And if you are a much more accomplished piano player than I am, your performances are probably far more sophisticated and travel, several octaves across the chromatic scale. This is why I love collapsed mode in the piano roll. Because collapsed mode removes all of the chromatic notes that are not part of your MIDI performance. This is incredibly helpful if you need to make adjustments to your performance, but you don't want to have to go up and down several octaves to find each and every note. Even better, when collapsed mode is enabled, it's enabled for every region you select. So if I select my retro analog synth here, boom, we're in collapse mode. And you can always uncollapse it if you need to work with notes outside of those notes that were performed. Another thing in the piano roll I lean heavily on is holding Shift and Option when adjusting many notes simultaneously. For example, perhaps I want to set all of these notes that we see on screen here to the same velocity. So if I select all my notes, hold Shift and Option, and go over here to the velocity slider, when I click and drag, all of my notes conform to the same velocity. So let's back it up. And notice this note here is a velocity of 11. We have 14 here and 29. When I select them all, hold Shift and Option, click and drag, boom. Now we're all at the same velocity. And once they conform, I don't have to hold Shift and Option again. I can just set them to the same velocity. Also, if I want to set all selected notes to the same length, let's just select our notes, hold Shift and Option, hover the mouse over the right boundary of one of the notes. If I click and drag, all right, all of these notes are now conformed to this one length. It's a little screwy, but let's try the smaller note here. Hold Shift and Option, right boundary, boom, everybody's the same short length. Really helpful when you want multiple notes in the piano roll to be identical. Number 2 is the relatively new long faders feature of the mixer and inspector. Maybe when you're mixing in Logic Pro, you tend to find the faders and the meters to be pretty stubby, right? They're pretty short, not a lot of throw to them. If I decide to boost this fader, it feels like I don't have to go very far to reach the top or very far to get to the bottom. And while the faders here are helpful, for example, if we select the Highlander here and solo it, and I'll just hit play, we'll take a look at the mixer. That's helpful, but what's more helpful in my opinion is the new view option for long faders. And booyah, look at that. The faders have doubled in size. They're essentially 100mm throws. And now, if you decide to play with a fader or view the meter, there's just so much more resolution for you to play with. In my opinion, it just feels a lot better. It feels like you have a lot more granular control over the faders in your projects. And it's worth pointing out that the inspector can also be set to long faders. So I'm right-clicking or holding Control and click to bring up these menus, and I can turn off long faders independently for the inspector and independently for the mixer. This is actually how I tend to work. I tend to leave long faders for the inspector and short faders in the mixer, mainly because, interestingly enough, this option for the mixer for long faders is on a per project basis. It's set for the project, but if you open a new project, you won't have long faders by default inside the mixer. But the inspector does carry over from project to project. So once set inside the inspector here, it'll carry on for any other project you open. Number 3 is patch merging. Let me ask you, perhaps sometimes you poke through the different presets in Logic Pro, and you wish you could keep specific elements of the channel strip you already have here in view from being changed. For example, I have this instance of Alchemy, I have a preset that I've loaded, and way too many plugins living in the audio effects slots here. But I'm curious about some of the other patches that come with Logic Pro. If I choose just another patch, so I'll choose Synth and I'll choose a lead and the 7th player here. So we see that everything about this channel strip has changed. I've lost my MIDI effects, I've lost my audio effects, and Alchemy is the same, but of course we've changed the preset here. So I'm going to undo. That's where patch merging comes into play. So if you go down to this menu in the bottom left-hand corner of the library and enable patch merging, you have this option to choose what to include or omit when switching patches. So here I have MIDI effects not included when loading a patch. So let's take a look. I have transposer here. Let me choose the 7th player patch again. All right, so everything has changed. The instrument, the audio effects, the sends, but the MIDI effect, the transposer, which I rely on a lot, is not removed. So this ensures that my MIDI performance stays in the key of G natural minor. All right, so let's undo again. And we could switch this up. So maybe I want to include switching up the MIDI effect, but I want to keep all my audio effects. Let me choose a 70s analog lead. All right, so I've lost the MIDI effect. I've lost the instrument. It's now retro synth, but all my audio effects are still there. For me, this is a thank God feature because specifically for the MIDI effects, because I rely on transposer to make sure that even if I don't play in key, I am in key. And why would I want that to change from patch to patch? But you might like your instrument or your audio effects or your sends, and maybe you prefer they don't change as you poke through the different presets and patches. Number 4 are 2 sets of key commands that allow you to find anything when it comes to tracks or plugins in Logic Pro. As you record and produce, your projects probably tend to balloon in size. And, this is a great project because it's still in this perpetual state of being written and arranged. And if we expand all of the tracks here, there's a lot to navigate through. And I have one track in mind in particular, and I want to find it quickly. So I'm going to use key command, control, command, and T to bring up the search and select track. And right here, I can type in the name of the track I'm thinking of. So I'm going to type in The Devil. And Logic instantly selects it and navigates to that track. And boom, Logic Pro instantly finds it for me. And as you start to type, you probably notice that Logic Pro offers different tracks in your project for potential selection. So if I just type in T, look at that. We have the triangle, the tom low, mid, high, tambourine, the Highlander, tape strings. And once again, if I select triangle, Logic selects it at the top here. So I gotta go find my devil track again. Now, just to point out, the reason I call it the devil is not because I'm evil, but instead, we've used Vocal Transformer to manipulate this voice to sound a little demony.
I started from the lip taste there.
So that sounds like gobbledygook, but there's a vibe we're after here. Now, the other key command I want to show you is the awesome Control, Command, and P to bring up the Search Audio Effect plugin pop-up menu. So right now, I could just type in the name of a plugin I'm thinking of to load it. I could type in a third-party plugin, so maybe I just type in, let's say, Sound Toys. This brings up the various Sound Toys plugins I own, or I could bring up something specific like the Pro Q4. But I'm actually interested in bringing up the pitch shifter. Right there, the pitch shifter is instantly loaded into the next available slot for my chosen track. And I chose the pitch shifter specifically for this preset right here, the vocal doubler. I'm going to set the mix to 100%, latency compensation on, and I'm going to invert the stereo link. And the reason I did this is sometimes I like to create a stereo effect, and the pitch shifter is a great way to do this. Notice.
I started from the lip taste there.
That's a lot different from the original.
I started from the lip taste there. I started from the lip taste there.
This is a backing voice, it's not the main vocal. And I wanted to envelop the main vocal with this clearly weird sounding voice. Number 5 is an awesome feature that allows you to take advantage of your iPad or iPhone for collecting notes or lyrics or information about your session that you want to put into Logic Pro's Notepad. So I'm going to hold Shift, Control, and P to open the Notepad on the right-hand side. And I want to add some project notes. Now, maybe you notice I have 2 instances of the I/O plugin. That's because I'm running this project to both a hardware EQ and compressor. And of course, I've found settings that I like for this project right now, but who knows for the future when I work on other projects. I may not use the same EQ settings or the same compression settings. So I probably should take pictures of my EQ settings and compressor settings so that I always can return to those settings that I chose for this project. Cool. I'll go to Edit up here in the Notepad. I'm going to right click or hold Control and click. And right at the bottom here is an option to insert from iPhone or iPad. And you can insert from your iPhone or iPad. You can either take a photo, scan a document, or add a sketch. I'm going to choose to take a photo. When I do, my iPhone instantly switches to camera mode so that I can take a picture of whatever I want to insert into the Notepad. So I'm going to hone in on my EQs to grab a pic. If I'm happy with the pic, I can just say use pic. Obviously, we're getting blown out a little right here. I probably would take another picture, but nonetheless, here's my picture of my EQ settings that I can refer to in the future just in case I, change something and I need to go back. If you don't have hardware, that's fine. Maybe it's a lyric sheet that you need to scan as a doc so that you can load right into the Notepad. Maybe it's the microphone setup for your drum kit or guitar amp, or maybe it's settings on an outboard synth, but really helpful for collecting information about your session that can live right in Logic Pro. And a bonus for the more advanced users, as I stated at the top of this video, something I lean on a lot in Logic Pro is an external audio file editor. So for example, I have the main vocals here, and right at the beginning of verse 2 here, there's a bit of a plosive. So solo the track, we'll take a listen.
Repurpose the rags, refine the...
That P of purpose, hits a little hard. And I do have a high pass filter here to round off any sort of plosive activity, but maybe I just want to get into an audio file editor and just clean it up. This is super simple in Logic Pro. So just go to Logic Pro, Settings, Audio, and under the File Editor tab in the Audio Settings is this option to set an external sample editor. So you can see here that I've set my external sample editor to Isotope RX. Now, it doesn't have to be RX specifically. It could be Audacity. It could be Acon Digital's Acoustica. It could be Melodyne. It really could just be any other external app that you want to use in tandem with Logic Pro to make, I should point out, destructive permanent edits. But now that that's selected, for my vocal here, if I want to open this vocal region inside RX, I can either go up to Edit and go down to Open in Isotope RX, or use Shift and W. So let's do that right now. All right, so here's the vocal performance inside RX. We even have markers for the different sections, and I can just get right in there and adjust the scale so I can find that plosive. And you can see it's right there. It's pretty crazy. So anyways, I can make an edit to the plosive. We'll use deplosive. We'll render it. Okay, it's cleaned up. And if I hold Command and press S to save, it's now been saved in Logic Pro. So we'll go back to Logic. And booyah, that edit has been made. And it's destructive. It's permanently embedded. The moment that I quit RX and I quit Logic Pro, it's a done deal. But if we go back to RX, if I undo, Command and S to save, go back. Okay, we see that plosive a little more prominently in Logic Pro. But the beautiful thing here is if you're confident in making permanent destructive decisions and you want to be able to basically work within Logic Pro without having to export files out of Logic into a separate audio file editor to make corrections to export back into Logic Pro, this is a feature that I use constantly. There's so many features in Logic Pro that remove friction from the creative process, whether you're recording, producing, editing, mixing, beat making, remixing, and I probably could have named 10 or 20 more. But what I would love to know is what friction-removing features in Logic do you love that you use in your own projects and music? Let me know in the comments below.